long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Trey Warndorf, a political scientist at Oklahoma Christian University, and I'm joined by Ken Katkin, a professor of law at Chase Law School. Ken, it's great to get to do the show with you again. Not that I hate Justin, but you know.
Yes, it's been a little while, but it's great to be back.
It has been a while, just a confluence of events. I'll be honest, though, just at the outset, I'm going to be, normally I'm the optimistic guy, and you're the slightly more pessimistic guy, I think, when we approach things in the show. And I'm just not in a good place today. So you're going to have to be the optimistic one today, Ken. So you need to put on your best optimistic hat and convince Trey, why he shouldn't just go back to sleep.
I'll do my best.
No pressure, no pressure at all. It's just teeny. Now, obviously everybody who's been listening to the show, Ken's been out for just a little bit. And so he hasn't had a chance yet to really weigh in on the shutdown, which continues as of today, Friday, October 24th. And so I wanted to give you a little bit of time to talk about that, Ken, but I will, just for those of you who've been under a rock on Mars, here's the really quick version of what's been going on. We continue to have a government shutdown as a result of the Senate not being able to pass a short-term spending bill, which has been largely held up by Democrats who have been hoping to hold out on Republicans until they can roll back a couple of provisions of the big, beautiful bill, specifically the ACA subsidies. And that's been kind of the centerpiece here. Meanwhile, this week, President Donald Trump urged Senate Republicans to hold firm and said, quote, "Our message has been simple. We will not be extorted on this crazy plot of theirs," end quote. Now, again, as regular listeners already know, Justin, myself, and Mike and others have already talked about this. I'll just quickly summate my position for you, Ken, which was similar to Justin's in some ways. I think the Democrats are losing here. I think they're going to continue to lose. I don't really see a path forward other than they're eventually going to have to give. The party of power is the one who feels the hits ultimately. This has been slightly different than that. But again, their own baseline assumption is you should always maintain the status quo. I think if the stalemate goes on much longer, especially since we saw today that Democrats voted down some kinds of emergency spending to get people pay, I don't think they're in a position to win. There's been me really quick, but I am curious about what your take is.
No, I think they're winning, actually. I think the Democrats are doing just fine.
They're winning? Come on, winning. You got to do better than that.
No, they're absolutely winning because, I certainly agree with part of what you said, which is that, in a kind of typical shutdown, as the shutdown goes longer and longer, the public gets sicker and sicker of it, and the public blames the party that's actually not relenting. So I agree with all that, but yet I think if you look at the polling numbers right now, you still see that more Americans are blaming the Republicans than the Democrats, even now today. So that I think is a huge win for the Dems, given that they're in the situation where historically they'd be the ones getting all the blame. And I think the other thing that's looming in the future, which will make the win for the Dems absolute and will make the Republicans cave, is that we're right upon the time when people who get their health insurance through Affordable Care Act exchanges have to re-up for next year. And so under current law, which is what they're going to see when they log on to healthcare.gov or under their state exchange websites. Most people, if they're in the 125% to 400% of poverty range, the main range that most people are in, the average person in that range is going to see that if they want to re-up for the same health insurance they have now, their health insurance rates that they have to pay out of pocket are going to multiply up by a factor of somewhere from 5 to 10. And so they're going to be very, very upset by that. And I think suddenly, that's going to give a lot of juice to the Dems, right? That's what the Dems are actually fighting for.
If there was any hope for making changes to this cycle by the time that occurs, I might potentially agree with you. But because the rates are going to be set and locked in stone, nobody's going to be changing those, even if you get some kind of concession on that happening midway through November. which means that I don't think Democrats have the kind of leverage power that you're talking about. So should people potentially get upset about that? I agree with you. Yes. But it'll be past the point of return for that process. And ergo, when there can't be a change, it will once again feel like a failure, no matter what gets the votes.
Yeah, I don't agree with that either. I mean, I don't see any reason it would be past the point of return. It would just involve whatever could be negotiated to end the shutdown, because the new rates don't take effect until January 1, even though the open enrollment period starts around November
November
1.
1.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and so people will see the new high rates when they log on November 1, but any time between November 1 and January 1, that could be changed, right? And my thinking is that the Dems
No, what I'm
already
suggesting is while you can change that, I don't think that the ACA providers are going to immediately have those numbers shift and change in real time. Those rates have already, I mean, they have to publish those, send those to their states, and have those come out prior to November 1st so that they can be on and there for the exchange rate. So I'm not disagreeing with you that Congress couldn't make those changes. What I'm suggesting is if it comes deep enough into November, that the relief, despite the fact that it could theoretically start on December 1, would not actually be felt at that juncture, because the rates by the companies will already have been set and published, and then you're done.
No, that's not right.
You're out of time.
The company's rates are not relevant. The company's rates are not going to change, and they don't have to change. But what's relevant is the tax credit that's available to help pay for that, right? So the way the Affordable Care Act is structured, it doesn't actually regulate what the insurers charge. It just pays a subsidy so that the taxpayer gets help paying what the insurers are charging. And so that could be changed in a minute. That doesn't take months. In fact, the what the Dems are holding out for is to just extend the 2025 subsidies into the future.
You mean the not 2025, but 2020?
Well, it's
Oh my
20,
goodness.
2021 through 2025. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, the ones that start the temporary ones that started in 2021. Yes,
Yeah, right.
absolutely. Sorry.
But those are the ones that people are still paying right now today, right? So
Yes,
these
yes.
so the 2021 Inflation Reduction Act greatly bumped up the subsidies compared to the original Affordable Care Act
Yes,
for a period
very
of
much
4
so.
years. Yeah. And so people are the rates that people are, your typical family of four with health insurance, the health insurer is probably getting about, $20,000 or more, but that's irrelevant to the family that's getting a subsidy, because the family that's getting a subsidy, they pay a portion of that under a formula that's only based on what their family income is, and not based at all on what the insurer's rate is, and then the government pays the rest. And so if that can be extended, then that's a change that can be made instantly, because it's just a change to the tax credit that comes through the IRS.
So the takeaway here for you is that you think Democrats have Republicans right where they want them, and that here come November, it's all downhill?
I do think that. Yeah, I think the
You're living
Dems
in
win.
fantasy
They win.
land, friend.
They
You're
win this
living in
shutdown.
left-wing fantasy land.
They win
I'm
this
sorry.
shutdown easily. I think the hard part for the Dems,
They don't. Republicans are going to back down. Republicans are not going to back down. They're not going to back down on this issue.
They're totally
Trump's not going to
back
back down on this issue. And they're going to absolutely eat it for having voted to not pay workers during the emergency period today, or last night / today. They're going to eat it.
Nah, they're not. They would already. They're in the hardest part right now. Like right now,
Can't you just see it now? There's
Yeah.
going to be these ads where it's the Democrats talking about Republicans not being willing to settle the shutdown for the status quo just a few years ago, and now the ad is going to be, this is what they said then, and here's what they did now, and they voted against these pays, and they voted against those pays, and it's going to hammer Democrats, absolutely hammer them.
Only for like a week, because we're really at that point already. Like the Dems should be probably at their lowest point politically right now, and because right now federal workers have already missed a paycheck, but the Affordable Care Act premiums haven't gone up yet. But the politics of that switch, because many more Americans are going to be affected by their health insurance rates going up than by the federal workers not being paid, and so the politics of how people are personally affected by this, right now, some people have been harmed by the shutdown, and no people have been benefited by it. So right now, the Dems should be at their weakest moment. But coming into November, many people will be benefited by the fight that the Dems are fighting because it's about their health insurance rates. So I think the politics flip, and I think it's not sustainable for the Republicans to deny an extension of the Affordable Care Act benefits. They actually their voters are I think at least as many. I think they're the larger share, in terms of
No,
who
I agree with
using
you
it.
there. I mean, empirically, it's undoubtedly that you have more. There are more me's. There are more Oklahomans who are going to be on those programs than New Yorkians, right? Comparatively speaking, I don't mean just
Yeah.
Oklahoman, but
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I think the politics will greatly turn in favor of the Dems, and I think it's significant that there's no really significant number of Dems who oppose the shutdown right now out there in the electorate. You're right that the Republicans are trying to gin up opposition, but I think the Dem voters are pretty immune from being influenced by Republican type ads.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question, but I think I will. I love your take, and it's interesting. Just so you know, like you were the lone voice on that one. Nobody else, like even your other Democratic colleagues, disagree with you on that one. So that is interesting. Most recently, Justin had taken a very opposite view. So I mean, this could be another time, right? I mean, there has been several times when we've gotten the crazy quote unquote Ken Katkin take who ended up being right. So we'll know. But I mean, obviously, one way or the other, it has to end because let's be honest, this isn't going to be happening in December, right?
Well, the shutdown, I think the shutdown will go to December, but I do think the Dems will win.
Oh, you think it'll go all the way to December? That'd make it the longest. I mean,
Yeah,
longest
it'll be
in
the longest
history
for
by
sure.
almost a factor of 3.
Yeah, because I think the reason it'll go to December is the kind of analysis that you gave and that I guess some of the other politics guys gave, where you see it obvious that the Republicans have to win. I certainly think that's how the Republicans are thinking about it, right? So they have no incentive to cave, but I think the Dems are thinking about it the way I'm thinking about it, and they have no incentive to cave either. And they really think time is. I think the Dems think time is on their side because I think they think the pressure from Affordable Act premium increases. That becomes a bigger and bigger factor over time, so that the longer it goes, the longer public opinion shifts to the Dems. I think that's how most of the Dems are thinking about it. So if there's a big disjunction between how the Republicans are thinking about it and how the Dems are thinking about it, then if they both think time is on their side, it can't end soon. It's got to drag on a long time.
Okay. Now oh man, I still think that is fascinating. Okay, so this is I think one of our biggest disagreements. You get back from a break, and here we are. We disagree right out of the gate.
Yeah.
But I will move us forward because we got a lot of things on the docket that we're going to try to get to. And this one, I don't think we're going to have as much daylight between us on this one. This past week, obviously, has seen the East Wing of the White House demolished. And as a student of the presidency, this is my area, it is difficult to understate how weird this story really is. So Trump tore down the East Wing of the White House in order to create a ballroom, a golden ballroom. I wish I was teasing about this, but it is in fact to be a golden ballroom. That's the only metal I guess you can use when you're Trump. I don't know. And that the East Wing will actually be larger than the rest of the White House structures combined based on what we think has been proposed to this juncture. As a matter of fact, we found out just yesterday on Thursday that the cost of this will be $300 million. But never fear. Trump is here, and no taxpayer money will be used towards this project. Instead, he's going to get a bunch of rich people and rich corporations to pay for it. We have that list, which also came out late yesterday. And basically, it's for a bunch of people to buy his favor. I mean to pay for the ballroom. Sorry, the ballroom. They're paying for the ballroom. It has nothing to do with wanting to curry favor with the Trump White House. As the former chief ethics lawyer for the W. Bush White House put it, Richard Painter, quote, "It's using access to the White House to raise money. I don't like it. These corporations all want something from the government," end quote. And I agree with Painter. Indeed, they do. But I think even more specifically, they want to have personal clout with Trump. That's been the modus operandi of the Trump presidency. Demolition began on Monday. It was quickly revealed in both media and then on social media where it has gone viral. As Trump put it, quote, "In order to do it properly, we had to take down the existing structure," end quote. The current East Wing Part of it dates to, we're going to get a little bit of history here. Part of this dates to the first Roosevelt who had put things together, but its current iteration, it actually dates to 1942 and FDR, who renovates that space from the original from the original Roosevelt. So, I mean, again, Trump isn't doing something different in the sense of modifying a structure. However, this would be the largest structural change to the White House in history, right? It's not even close. And obviously, given the size and scope of the project, would be the biggest go. On Tuesday, after those pictures of the demolition had surfaced, the White House announced that it would submit plans for the ballroom construction to the National Capital Planning Commission. But let's be honest, there's an old saying, and I think you probably know this one too, Ken. It feels a little bit like me closing the barn door after the cow's already out, right? Like, we'll submit the plans now that the structure has been raised. Again, I don't necessarily, there's a sacrosanct kind of history to some things, and it's fine to have a president who wants to make changes. Personally, the issues that I have here are, one, it's shady to me that we're doing it privately, given the kinds of issues we've had with Trump presidencies in buying access. And two, I don't think it's going to be the grand ballroom for the ages. Point me to another structure that Trump has ever built that I think we're going to be looking at and going, yes, the White House Trump, in 2142. This doesn't seem likely. What are your takes on this, Ken?
Yeah, I've I think that it violates a lot of laws, and interestingly, there's been one lawsuit filed already. I don't know if that's going to be successful because the plaintiffs don't seem to me to really have standing to bring the case. But a couple who lives across the river in Virginia who has a view of it did file a lawsuit. Their name is Voorhees, and they filed that in federal district court just a couple days ago. They mostly focused in their lawsuit on some of the statutes you were talking about, the National Capital Planning Act and the National Historic Preservation Act, which they allege violations of. I think there's some more fundamental statutes that are being violated here, not just the ones related to historical preservation and things like that, but in terms of the funding sources, and this is not mentioned in the lawsuit that was filed, but it's hard for me to believe that no federal funds are being expended on this, and so if federal funds are expended on it, that's going to violate something called the Anti-Deficiency Act.
Yes,
It's and that's actually got criminal provisions as well. So it is a crime for anyone to spend money out of the federal treasury that hasn't been appropriated.
I don't want to interrupt you, though. I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to ask you a question, because I had thought about that a little bit. But wouldn't the most recent Supreme Court ruling effectively suggest that because Trump is doing this in the course of his ordinary presidential duties, that those kind of criminal statutes would be inapplicable to the president?
Yeah, but they wouldn't be inapplicable to anyone else. So, like Scott Bessent probably had to cut the checks, right? So there's going to be people in the administration who don't benefit from the presidential immunity. So
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay, continue.
yeah,
I had thought and wondered about that, so I appreciate your insight there. Continue.
Yeah, and then and I don't know that would be criminally enforced. It's not commonly criminally enforced, even though the most of the main enforcement mechanisms for Anti-Deficiency Act are civil, but there's just a rarely used criminal part of it. But it would at least be correct to say that if any federal funds have been expended on this that haven't been appropriated by Congress for it, that violates the Anti-Deficiency Act. I think also other provisions of the Anti-Deficiency Act could also be applicable, even if there's not federal funds being expended, because it's actually illegal under the same statute for people to provide volunteer work to the government that Congress hasn't authorized. So that's one of the reasons, for instance, during a shutdown, that the inessential workers are not allowed to go to work, right? So it's not
I'll be honest, that is not something I was familiar with.
Yeah. So the Anti-Deficiency Act is where the sort of category of essential workers comes from. And so Congress has authorized, certain essential workers to provide volunteer work when they're not being paid. But the general rule that applies to people who don't fall within that essential workers category would be that it's illegal for anyone to provide any volunteer work to the government unless Congress authorizes it. So
Okay.
if some of this is volunteer work that's say construction contractors are saying, Mr. President, we'd love to knock down the East Wing for you, and just because we love you so much, that kind of thing would already violate the Anti-Deficiency Act, even if it wasn't a bribe. And I also think in many instances here, this should be seen as violating bribery statutes, although, of course, there's
Well,
going
and
to
that's
have to
what
be
I was
predicate. Yeah.
most curious about, right? Because given that it's private and he's soliciting donations, it almost seems impossible to be able to separate the donation to me structure, especially since he's saying he's going to put in his own money, from a thing that you're doing for me, which is on its face generally seen as being illegal.
Yeah, I mean, well, so there's going to have to be a quid pro quo. So, I mean, this is going to be individual to the donors, but there's going to be some donors who are donating money to this, maybe who it's going to be it's not going to be easy to see what they're getting for it, right? And so that might not be bribery, but there's probably going to be some donors where it's going to be possible to prove out that later there's some official government act that was done in their benefit in consequence of the donation, and so that could make it bribery. And then the last piece of that is some of the donors are foreign as well. Like I saw T-Mobile was one of the donors, and that's Deutsche
Yes.
Telekom. That's Deutsche Telekom. That's a German company. So that is, even if there's no quid pro quo there, that violates the Foreign Emoluments Act as well as the Emoluments Clause of the U.S. Constitution for him to just accept gifts from foreigners.
Well, and again, not to get too into this, but of course, this wasn't maybe a full story, but something I thought might fit here. This week, President Donald Trump had also pardoned, Zhao, or CZ as he was known, and it seems likely that part of the reasoning for that was that his company had been pumping up Trump's own crypto efforts, and so to see those kind of things happening side by side, it's hard not to draw. I recognize what you're saying, that in every instance it might be difficult to see it, but even if you're being very understanding or coming from a positive point of view from the Trump administration, it's hard not to see those things together and say, wait a second, you pumped up my crypto, I'm going to pardon your guy. Hey, you put money in for the wing, we're going to let you be the one that buys TikTok, or fill in the blank.
I would consider a case like the crypto pardon to be a case that I think it would be provable that there was quid pro quo corruption. And up until the Trump immunity case, the law would have been different on this. The pardon would be effective even if it was in exchange for a bribe. The person would still be pardoned. But before the Trump immunity case, that selling an official act like that could have been prosecuted as a crime. So it's only really, it wouldn't undo the pardon, but it could have put the president in
Penalty.
jeopardy of a criminal conviction. Yeah,
Mhm.
and so that has changed. So the pardon selling, I think, is going to be kind of hard to rein in. But a lot of these other law violations involve more than just the person of the president. And to the extent other people in the administration are implicated in the schemes, they don't get any of that criminal immunity.
So now, on the other hand of this, I will say I talked with a bunch of people who are not deeply invested in politics. I kind of have a cadre of people I like to float things to. And they all kind of uniformly had very different views of this moment. They liked the idea that, it's not taxpayer. I mean, that was actually legal or illegal. As one person put it, who cares if that's what's legal or illegal? I mean, isn't it a great thing that taxpayers aren't footing a bill? And isn't it a great thing we're having? Do you think that this will end up being popular or not popular? I think from our point of view, we come at it from a particular lens and go, man, this is terrible. But what do you think about more generally? I was curious on your take on that, because I was a little bit. Again, it's not a formalized poll or anything, but I will say that it seemed far more popular than I would have thought among my just generalized cohort of individuals that like to tap on things from now to now, tap on their shoulder. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to claim to have my finger on the pulse beat of the American voter, so I don't know. But
That's
I
fair.
I do think, I'll just say more from my perspective how I would think about trying to talk about it. That it would be. It should be I'm not saying it will be popular or unpopular. I'm saying I think it could be made to be more unpopular by linking it to other kinds of bribery and corruption that Trump's involved with, right? This is just another, or
like
here's,
with the finance tech. I agree.
yeah, I mean, this is a guy who just also, is suing the government for $240 million in his
We're
personal
going to get to that in a
capacity.
minute.
Yeah, and then directing the government to settle the suit, right? And so it's
Settle my suit,
settle my
Justice
suit.
Department.
Yeah. So I mean, I think if you put it in that kind of level of, he's just feathering his own nest every way that he can. Another thing I would like to, another kind of rhetorical frame I'd like to put this in is, he actually just succeeded in something that Osama bin Laden failed at, which is bombing the White House, right? Osama bin Laden tried on September 11th to destroy the White House, and because those brave passengers on that flight, managed to crash the flight in Pennsylvania instead of letting it hit the White House, so Americans were able to foil Osama bin Laden's efforts to destroy the White House, and Trump just went ahead and did it anyhow. He finished Osama bin Laden's terrorist work for him, and I think, I do think people should be talking about it in frames like that, and hopefully that would give people second thoughts who are currently thinking this is a good thing.
Okay, I'm not going to lie to you. I have rarely been happier that we live this far apart.
Yeah.
Not that I necessarily disagree with the analogy, but like that. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that.
He's destroying our government, one step at a time, and now symbolically he's literally destroying the White House as part of his plan of destroying the government.
No, I think is the underlying. It is such a symbolism for that, right? I can't disagree with you. It is such a symbolism of we're going to tear things down and rebuild them in the Trumpian way. But well, let's continue talking about Trump, but maybe pivot slightly and talk a little bit about the appeals court siding this past Monday with Trump. So Monday, a federal appeals court sided with President Trump to allow him to maintain federal control over the Oregon National Guard. Now, Justin and I covered the other half of this story 2 weeks ago, and we were saying, well, this one still needs to come out, and now it's come out. The underlying reasoning of the court here, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in this case, which ruled differently than we saw earlier, found that the president, quote, likely exercised his statutory authority, end quote, in their opinion. And while the president's assessment of the situation may not be perfect, they have some conversations about this in their introduction, they do believe it's within, quote, the range of honest judgment, end quote. So the underlying response from the court, when you really start to read into it, is that there have been a variety of real protests. There have been actual attacks on ICE facilities, and specifically in Portland, there has been a real quote, destruction of property, end quote, and along with attacks that included, quote, armed individuals, end quote. And so because of these, the president does have the ability to move forward with his plans. Now, it's worth noting, as a matter of fact, Ken, since we're going to be finishing our Constitution series this week, we've been doing this for a number of years now. We're going to finally be finishing that up. I couldn't help but notice that the court once again ruled that the 10th Amendment has no real meaning. we talked about that a while ago, and that was actually one of the petitioner's arguments. I was a little bit curious. I mean, it wasn't a big one. I didn't think it was going to go anywhere, but it was fast. It was fun to get to read that guy. Basically, if the president, their take was if the president or Congress does it, well, then of course the 10th Amendment can't apply because they've done it. But I just thought that was cool. And then for those of you who haven't been along with us, we'll be finishing that up. So join us, I hope, for our last constitutional issue. But to get back to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the only dissent comes from Judge Graber, who argued that there is no evidence at the level to which her colleagues are suggesting that there is not a war-ravaged Portland in her case, and there's no reason to believe that ICE could not have protected its Portland facilities without the National Guard. Right now, in an emergency ruling, the Ninth Circuit Court is being asked to hear the case en banc. In other words, more justices than just the three who generally listen to a case at a time. So, Ken, this is obviously different than the one that Justin and I took up, which landed on the other side of the aisle. What is your take on the Ninth, or on that broader take as well?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the Seventh Circuit came down the other way on this in Chicago, but I think in understanding the Ninth Circuit's decision, it's I know most listeners aren't interested in like all the procedural aspects of a case, but I think the proceduralisms are very important here because a big part of the reasoning did turn on the fact that this was a preliminary injunction that the district judge had given before actually having a trial. Right. So I wouldn't overread the Ninth Circuit decision as saying that that Trump is justified in sending the troops. I think it actually doesn't say that. But what I think it says is that it's too early to say whether he's justified or not justified, and he gets the benefit of the doubt at this stage. So it's been remanded back to Judge Immergut's courtroom, for a full trial. And Judge Immergut, the federal district judge in Portland, who initially ruled against Trump in the Portland case, she herself is a Trump appointee. She looked at the evidence early and said, I'm seeing, and she used her own personal that she lives in Portland and she could see with her own eyes what was going on there, as well as looking at the evidence. And she said that it looks to her like most of the evidence that Trump is giving about the inability of ordinary federal agencies like ICE to enforce the law in Portland. It's that evidence was strung together over a 5-year period rather than being evidence of what's going on there right now currently. And she thought there was much more evidence that there was no real inability of ordinary civil enforcement authorities to enforce. So she ruled that the military couldn't be used. The only thing that the Ninth Circuit said about this is, and again, this is 2 Trump judges against 1, I think, Clinton judge on the panel. The 2 Trump judges said that even though Judge Immergut may be right, that it looks like there's a lot more evidence that there's no need for the National Guard than that there is. There's some evidence that there is, and the trial hasn't been held yet. And so at this stage, the president should get the benefit of the doubt. So it doesn't really preclude Judge Immergut from reaching the same conclusion that she reached before after she has a full trial. And I would actually expect that that's what's going to happen. And I'll add, you mentioned that the Ninth Circuit's an unusual circuit just in terms of its size. Most of the circuit courts have 11 or 12 judges. The Ninth Circuit has 28, and that leads to some differences in how they proceed on cases. So there is a proceeding that you mentioned called en banc that exists in every circuit. So in every circuit, if a 3-judge panel decides a case and either a dissenting judge on the panel or even one of the judges who wasn't on the panel petitions the full court, which in most circuits would be all 11 or 12 judges, could rehear the case and then could overrule the panel or could reaffirm the panel. Because they have 28 judges in the Ninth Circuit, they also have an en banc procedure, but they never sit with all 28 judges. So it would just be another panel of 12 to review the panel of 3. And actually, that initial petition was already denied. So there's not.
I had missed that. Thank you.
Yeah, there's not going to be a panel of 12 rehearing the 3-judge panel's decision. So when I kind of think through that, and I'm thinking, the panel decision I do partly attribute to the fact that it's 2 Trump judges. It's, no other judges voted that way. So that would somewhat imply, maybe, if you brought it to a larger number of judges, it might go the other way. But then if you look at, but the larger number of judges could have reviewed it and they didn't want to, why is that? There's 2 possibilities, right? I mean, one is they could think that the panel got it right and that's why they don't want to review it. But another possibility could be they actually think that the better way to put an end to all this is just to let it get back to Judge Immergut's courtroom as fast as possible without hanging it up with more of these different kind of procedural delays, because then she can just have the trial and then she can rule on the facts. And I think a lot of those judges might expect that after that happens, she'll rule the same way she ruled the first time. And so I kind of lean towards that interpretation, although I can't rule out the other interpretation, right? I mean, it could be that that there is a majority on the Ninth Circuit who agrees with the panel, but I do think it's more likely that the majority on the Ninth Circuit agrees with Judge Immergut and sees time being of the essence here and just doesn't want to slow things down with extra appellate proceedings before we can even proceed to trial. And so the case will proceed to trial. And if there's an appeal after that trial, it'll be on a different kind of factual record. Factual findings will have been made, rather than just, in a preliminary injunction proceeding, they're kind of predicted but not made. And also it could be a different three-judge panel that gets that appeal. So for all those reasons, I still think that Trump is going to lose the Portland case, but it's just that he got a little bit of a reprieve right now.
Okay. Well, I think we need to turn to another story then, because I think I appreciate some of the context there as you get into the little bit of the weeds. Let's move forward. Well,
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
Well, I think the one that I want to do next, Ken, to make sure that we get it in, it's kind of an unusual case that's moving forward. Arizona's Attorney General sued the House of Representatives, and more specifically, Speaker Mike Johnson, over his refusal to seat an Arizona member of Congress who was elected back in September as a result, in Johnson's words, as a result of the government shutdown. And Johnson has argued that he is following the Pelosi precedent in not administering the oaths of office, noting that when Republicans had won special elections, then Speaker Nancy Pelosi had waited until lawmakers had returned to Capitol Hill following those periods of recess. But in this case, the answer has been, well, why can't you do it sooner, since we've had this kind of long, in her words, it's a patently absurd response that she can't be ruled in because she could make differences in fact what's happening right now. And here's another one of those kind of con law things that we've dealt with, is there is this weird, members are elected, but then they have to be seated before they fulfill their roles. And as she put it, she said, I've been waiting 28 days since winning the election, and arguing that the Constitution does not give the Speaker any particular authority to delay anyone's seating. So, Ken, what are your thoughts on this is kind of a technical one, but it's also a big deal given, what we led with. What do you think in terms... There have been, I've gone back, Johnson's not wrong. There have been delays to members of Congress being seated in the past by former speakers. Is this just precedent, or is this unconstitutional precedent?
Yeah, it's a very vague area of constitutional law. I think there are strong arguments on both sides on this one. So each house does get the power to make its own rules. And then if there's questions about whether a house is following its own rules, that's usually considered to be a non-justiciable political question. So courts, even if the House has made a rule, if a member of Congress says the House is not following its rule, they can't usually sue on that. So I think those are sort of the arguments on Johnson's side, that there's not really judicial supervision of this kind of thing, and there's not even a clear rule that he's violating anyhow. I think on the other side, there is a little bit of precedent around, not so much around the timing issues, which are here, but around the issues of exclusion. So the Constitution does give the House some power to exclude members who are elected. Excluding is different than expelling. So expelling is after they've got their seat, they get kicked out. Excluding is never seating them in the first place. So yeah. So the House has the power to exclude members, although it needs to be done by a 2/3 vote, which I think has not happened here, and wouldn't happen. He wouldn't get a 2/3 vote for that. And also, it needs to be based on some specific kinds of reasons, like finding that the person who's showing up to take their seat, doesn't meet the constitutional qualifications. Maybe isn't 25 years old, isn't a U.S. citizen, doesn't live in the state that they got elected from, or didn't actually win the election. So those would be types of reasons for exclusion, and it would take a 2/3 vote. And there's a very strong precedent in a case called Powell versus McCormick that holds that that an elected member has a right to be seated and not excluded, unless those specific criteria are met, and unless the 2/3 vote also happens. So I think on the issue of whether she can take her seat or not, she has a very strong argument that she can. But in terms of, when can she take her seat, it's a little more ambiguous here because she, I think the only actual business that she's not being able to participate in is the Epstein petition, right? Because everything else,
which she calls out specifically. Yeah, you're right.
yeah,
You're right.
yeah, right. Because since the House has never sat for anything but a pro forma session and formally hasn't done any business since she was elected, there's no business that the House took up that she hasn't had the ability to participate in. But the discharge petition, just for in case listeners don't know how this procedure works. Discharge petition is a special procedure when the speaker will not bring something up that a majority of members of the House want brought up, right? So that's not something that comes up on the agenda. That's something that can be filed at any time if a majority of members sign it. And if a majority of members sign it, then it has to be brought up. And so right now, she would be the 218th vote. So there's 217 members who've already signed a discharge petition to release the Epstein files. And if she were a member, she could sign it. And she could sign it no matter whether or not the House considers itself open for business or not. It's just that would have to be the next thing they get to when they open back up for business. So that's the true practical significance here is that what can a House member do when the House is not actually in session? The one and only thing a House member can do when the House is not in session is sign a discharge petition. The House doesn't have to be in session for that. So I think Johnson's stated position is that he will swear her in, before the House opens and does any business. So it's not like he's trying to exclude her from, voting on bills or anything like that. But by not swearing her in now, that's the significance of it. And, maybe, that's the kind of thing they're not going to be able to keep the House closed forever. He's able to delay this Epstein thing a little bit. But, I have a feeling that the House, even with my dire prediction I made earlier in today's show that the shutdown won't really end until December, I still think that's faster than this litigation is going to move. So I think ultimately, the House is going to reopen and she's going to get sworn in before we get a court decision on this. And so I think this will maybe stay in that gray area. But I also think as soon as she's sworn in, she will be the 218th member to sign the Epstein petition, and there will be some fireworks then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, especially since there's such disagreement among the Republicans and their caucuses over, what to do about this. And so it's not exactly, that one has transcended kind of the partisan issue or the partisan positions at this point. Well, Ken, why don't we chat just a little bit here at the end with kind of both a minor but a developing kind of set of stories that's come out. And that has been all of the group chats and the particular texts to reporters that have been floating around this past week particularly, but also the week before as well that we didn't get a chance to talk about on the show. So much of this has been happening, as a matter of fact, that The Atlantic has dubbed this the group chat presidency era, and that this is the new thing. And presidency is one of my areas, political communications my other one. So I always find this kind of stuff fun. So anytime I see an intersection of politics and communications, I kind of want to talk about it a little bit. So let me talk about some of these incidents that has brought this to the fore. Paul Ingratiae withdrew this week from consideration for a post after his group chats were leaked, which included racial slurs and comments that he has a Nazi streak. In his exact words being, quote, "I do have a Nazi streak in me from time to time." And this comes to us from Politico. Then this week, the Politico ran an article about messages in which young Republicans were cracking about gas chambers and also using a variety of ethnic slurs. But wait, it's not just group chats. Lindsay Halligan, who is actually a reporter at Lawfare, got uninvited text messages, well, encrypted text messages, but text messages from Signal from the interim U.S. Attorney General overseeing a bunch of these controversial prosecutions for Trump. And then after releasing all of these things says, by the way, that's off the record, way after the fact. In the leaks themselves, this isn't like they're getting hacked or anything. As a matter of fact, the ones from the Young Republicans actually came from other people in the group chat who were weirded out by them enough that thought, you know what, we actually need to release these. This is not okay. Nobody should be talking about this and sharing them with reporters. Or again, in the case of Halligan, releasing it themselves to the reporters. So the Atlantic kind of summed this up as saying, look, this is the price of having underqualified people running these positions, and point back even to the Signal links that came from the Defense Department, or I guess the War Department now. Although the other bit of this, I think, is just that we have entered into an era where I think more and more people communicate this way, and we're getting kind of the weirdnesses of those. But it is strange to me how many people don't recognize that the things that they write down could be shared, right? Like I feel like we could have a little business just being in DC, Ken, and saying, friends, you can screen cap those Signal messages. Just a forewarning. As a matter of fact, it warns you about that when that occurs. So what are you? I mean, I kind of think of this as more. I don't disagree with the Atlantic's take that there's an element of we've got unqualified people in different locations. I think that there's truth to that. I think that's a variable, but it doesn't feel like it's the only variable here. It feels like, I think the two things that I'll say is, one, it feels a little bit like that we are finally coming to understand in a fuller way what political communication in the United States is going to look like in governing in a true texting and group text message era. The other bit here, though, I think is that these are not so much surprising because of the modality of them. I think they're surprising because the content of the messages illustrates, I think, some of the problems that many of us have had with some of the parties in the United States, particularly Republicans at this juncture, right? I'll never forget, I was working at Daytona State College at the time, and I had just started working in the honors college there. I was going to do work for that. It was a lot of fun, enjoyed that time. And we had this student come up, and he was meeting with a couple of the professors, because in our honors college, it was more than one professor. You were actually taking a class from three of us, and we're sitting there along with the chair. So there's four professors there. And very quickly, this student had made back to back to back. It was so fast, you couldn't even stop it. Back to back to back to back, just horrendous anti-Semitic, about Jew oven things, right? And he's like, "Oh, isn't that fun?" And I mean, and I got down. I was like, "That is no, we don't talk like this. This is evil. No, get out of here, and you can come back and chat with us when you can talk like an adult." I think that's more.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think another way I would think about what you just said, but I mean, it's on the same page as what you just said, is that I think that, many prior administrations would at least try to project kind of the ethos that even though, every president's been elected on a partisan basis, is affiliated with one party, that, once they're in the government, even if they're trying to carry out their party's agenda, to some extent, they have to accept the responsibility that they're the government for the whole country. And I think that this administration is maybe the first one that truly doesn't even adopt that rhetoric, right? Like even rhetorically, the Trump government is the government for the MAGA constituency, and it's really the government against the other Americans that are out there. And I think, with that kind of rhetoric coming down from the top, and that kind of mind frame being sort of rewarded, it ends up encouraging the kind of content that you're seeing in these group chats, where other I think in prior administrations, even if there would have been people who held views that most people would consider loathsome, they would have not communicated those, because they would have realized that doesn't, it's not a good look. But I think that kind of consciousness is gone, because now it's like, owning the libs, would be a good look, in the eyes of Trump, right? right? So governing for everybody, would be the thing that's not the good look.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Ken, I think maybe we should end ourselves right here. Man, I didn't think we were going to get as many stories as we did. So this has been phenomenal. And it's so fun to get to be doing this back with you again.
Yeah. So
So
we're gonna do a bonus show soon too, right?
yes, and that's
Uh-huh.
what we got to talk about, right?
Yep.
So if you've been a long time listener, you know that Ken and I 3 years ago, in October, no less, we started out a project as a result of listeners. A bunch of supporters said, would you guys read the Constitution? Initially, the question was, would the politics guys read the Constitution verbatim? But as we got into asking supporters about that, what they were most curious about was not just the text of the Constitution, but understanding it. And so Ken and I said, you know what? I teach an undergraduate con law class. I teach a number of those kind of classes, and then obviously Ken is he's a real con law professor. I'm just kind of I'm the undergraduate make believe guy. Uh, but and we said, well, let's go through the Constitution one piece at a time for our bonus shows. And I love the fact that it's going to make this beautiful 3-year circle that we're coming up. So we're going to be doing our last Politics Guys bonus show on the Constitution, and we're going to be recording it in just a few minutes. And I'd love for you to get to be a part of that, but it's going to be, as it always has been, for subscribers only. And we're going to take on the last of the amendments. We're getting to the end, which is a lot of fun. So not only did we go through all the text of the Constitution, we've gone through all of the constitutional amendments. And I also have some fun things to announce is that for supporters, we're going to be putting these together into a package where you can listen to them in their totality all the way through without having to go back and find them in that sense. So this is a great time to become a supporter, because that means even if you thought, I haven't done that, you're going to be able to get access to Trey and Ken Presents the Constitution, and you'll be able to binge it if you want to. If you really want to, you can start with the preamble and get all your way to the end of the U.S. Constitution's 20th Amendment. Maybe we'll find out about what that means in a minute. So I really encourage you, if you've been interested in this, become a supporter of the Politics Guys to get this. And if you're already, I'm really excited for what you guys are going to be getting both today and then as a bigger project, as a bigger release also coming up in the upcoming weeks. So if you want to do that, just head down to the show notes. You can become a supporter. It's really quick. It just takes a couple of minutes. There's all different kind of plans, and you can get the plan of your choice so that you can be listening to that exclusive show in just a little bit. You can also head to politicsguys.com/support to see all the different ways. We've got other methods besides Patreon. You can always obviously hit us up on Patreon at Politics Guys as well. If you would like to really help the show, subscribing, rating, and reviewing is big. It's a big deal. You can also always just email us at mail@politicsguys.com if you'd like to know more, or if you would have questions about the show, or if you're not in a financial position to support the show, but you'd like to listen to that last episode again, reach out to us at mail@politicsguys.com. The executive producers of the Politics Guys are Wilma Marino, Daniel Toe, Ryan Beasley, Don Oglesby, Derek Schmidt, Dakota Heath, Jason Chrysler, Dave Dean, Jeremy Larson, Ryan Matza, and Jody Miller. We'll be back with a full episode next week. I hope you'll join us then.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.